It's no secret that there's a huge rift between boomers and millennials. And that's because boomers, they have a life experience in which things work out for them. They have the life experience of saving for a house, buying the house, paying it off, bam. They have the experience of getting a job, working that job the rest of their life. They have the experience of that kind of plucky optimism paying off, and they have that experience of optimism being renewed again and again. And so then they instill in millennials, hey, have this plucky optimism. All you have to do is go down to that place you want to work with your resume and say, hey, I'm a plucky young girl, ingenue, and I'm ready to work hard. And they expect that because it worked out for them in their particular time, that it will work out for millennials. But what actually happened with millennials is we basically live in that Linkin Park in the end song, where it's like, I tried so hard, and in the end it doesn't even matter. We got this, what's the point? We got this cynicism and detachment that we started to have to adapt because things just kept not working out. We'd work hard, we thought, oh, this is going to end up paying off and we're going to have progression. But instead, there's a sense with millennials, I know a lot of millennials who are constantly, they get stuck in assistant or eternal assistantship kind of serf type of jobs. Or they're always social media managers, or they're always even for a while there was like the eternal internship, the eternal assistantship, the eternal serf, and then realizing that they were even, sometimes there was this like gratitude for even just having a job like that. But eventually it started to lean into a what's the point? What's the point? There was a sense of working really hard, but then, with a lot of things, we had recessions. We also have a cynicism in terms of the dating culture, which has that same echo of what's the point? There's a wound of trying really hard and then getting disappointed, and then from that adapting to a level of detachment and cynicism in order to not get hurt again. And that's the thing about when I see a lot of like Gen X and boomers judging millennials, it's because they didn't live in a time of that kind of scarcity and recession and a real separateness. There's a separateness where every millennial is in a separate, lonely bubble with a screen, putting out a digital avatar that looks cool, but ultimately not having a sense of feeling like they are understood and seen. There's a lot of a kind of invalidation of the millennial, always being invalidated. So if a millennial, if they work hard and they get disappointed and they try to express, there's just kind of a like invalidation that, well, you gotta be patient, you gotta keep working hard, you gotta do this, you've got to keep that plucky attitude and stay in the machine, stay in that 9-to-5 system, stay in this conformity. It works for us. Why are you complaining? Why do you have this curiosity about self-awareness and figuring out yourself? Why don't you just get in line, jump into the conformity train, and that's what you must do, millennial. Like, why are you questioning things? Why don't you just get married, have a kid, be in the 9-to-5? It's easy. Come on, millennial. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? That's the kind of messaging that millennials get. And then millennials feel like, oh, damn, I feel ashamed that I dared have a question of what's the point. I feel so ashamed that I had the question of why can't I question this system, or why do we work? Why do we have this? Why do we have this idea that the hard work will pay off, when in my experience not having that happen? So millennials feel really invalidated by these other generations that basically say, oh you little narcissist, oh you little entitled, oh you little screen obsessed, ego obsessed person. But what I see that as is, I see that these generations don't have a curiosity to understand. They have a resentment, as all older people do, toward young people. And it's not as though the millennials aren't aging right now, but the same thing's happening, of course, with the Gen Z version of millennials. But we have this judgment, and it's because there's a lot of resentment in those older generations that they have so much their coat. Their coat is their coat. Like they don't like to really think too deeply into, hey, why are we doing this? Hey, why do I always do this behavior? They're always they kind of have a bit of an externalizing blame, which is why they're externalizing blame on millennials. Millennials tend to internalize blame and think, man, I am weird, I am entitled, I'm egocentric. And then they think, I want to go to therapy, I want to figure it out. And then they start to share what they learned, and they're trying to understand what's the point. There's a mask of cynicism, but what they're really seeking is to be seen and understood, instead of constantly made this scapegoat of a bunch of screen-obsessed narcissists and selfish people. Because millennials, it's like we were given the message of work hard, you'll achieve things, believe in it. That didn't work out, and then instead of us getting empathy, we got, well, that's you. We got invalidation. And the thing about us is, for instance, there was this Gen X guy he's a construction kind of company. He was talking about how he was going to hire a millennial, and that he was offering with the job that person would have their housing paid for and vehicle in addition to the job. And then that person asked about vacation, and that Gen X person was annoyed at that and thought, oh, that's so entitled to ask about vacation. And then ultimately this millennial did not take this job and ended up taking a job in another town. That, to me, that town that he chose is a more desirable living place. It's beautiful, and it has more of a vitality and youthful exuberance to it, right? And the town that was offering the free apartment, the free vehicle, and didn't want to talk about vacation, well, that town is not a desirable place to live. It tends to just be kind of the chain stores and bleakness and industrial, right? So the Gen X man was expressing contempt for the millennial, because how dare he acted like he was so entitled, and how dare he take another job in that place when this job offered the housing and car. And to a point, it does seem like a desirable thing, but where's the sense of entitlement coming? There's the sense of entitlement that you assume that a millennial, that's their main, that they should be lucky to get that, because there's almost a sense of, who do you think you are, which is a thing that all these generations kind of say to us. Who do you think you are? Well, we were told that we were told something, we got a lot of disillusionment, and now we don't take as much shit, because there's a sense of, no matter how hard you work, you won't get very far. So I'm going to have at least my time, because I've had a lot of time, like it's millennials kind of have. I've had a lot of time wasted from putting in a lot of energy, not seeing it reflect back. So when this guy, I think that the millennial that didn't want that job, it's like, well, he wanted to prioritize that he wasn't just going to be a slave, and even he knew that the apartment and the driving was almost like a way of putting in a lot of pressure to just be the slave, because how dare you can't, So he was asking about vacation probably because he probably prioritizes having the great outdoors as a part of his life and work-life balance. And the place that's why, like, living in the place his job was offered, he'd have to drive further to get to the place he ultimately ended up moving to be able to do the things he wanted to do, like really epic hiking and mountain climbing and all those kinds of things. And skiing. Probably that, because he ultimately went on to live in a more desirable ski town. So this idea that when that people act like, oh, millennials, who do they think they are going above the system? That's kind of like, who do they think they are wanting vacation? Who do they think they are putting that? And it's like, well, if that's their right. They don't have to take a job just because you are putting this kind of, in fact, sometimes when you're forgiving that kind of almost guilt-tripping entitlement thing, that's a turnoff to millennials, because we're really tired of being at the whim of these older generations, always waiting for them to be the gatekeeper to let us be anything. And that's another problem with millennials, is we have a sense of thinking we have to have somebody that grants us what we want to do. It's like we're waiting for the Gen X and the boomers to see us and maybe give us the big break or the opportunity. But the way that they come at us is that you better be grateful for this, you little serf. That's kind of what, you better be grateful for this, you little serf. And sometimes we've been in a situation where we have been in that serf role for so long that we're a little tired of people coming at us with this kind of judgment and viewing us with invalidation. That we push back on, come on, you little serf, with, oh, actually no, I am going to choose, just because you think you can guilt me into this, I'm going to choose something else just to show that I have that autonomy to choose what's best for me, and that I can't be bought by these kind of stability tokens. Now, I understand where that Gen X man was coming from. It is a really great offer to get your gas and housing paid for. However, to assume that is going to be a guaranteed yes, it shows that you really need that millennial, and you resent that you need them, and you resent that they dare ask about vacation. Well, maybe maybe they have certain things that are a priority in life that they like to balance with work, and be able to spend the money they use from work on those things. For instance, skiing, and maybe they want to, if it comes down to it, they would rather live in a town that offered that. And it's not about just the offer, but maybe the quality of life was better in that, living in that ski town, that outdoorsy town, that town that had that vitality rather than this industrial slump, right? And there's a sense of, I think that as millennials are aging and in their 30s and some in their 40s, I think some, technically maybe there are, that they are prioritizing getting out of always being in a slave role, and that's kind of part of making this system better by kind of having the conversations of, hey, why can't we question the current system? And why can't we ask the thing, what's the point? Why do we just have to go on the hamster wheel and not question it like you guys are? Because we've had opportunities to question it, because we've always been at the whim of a lot of recessions and being in slave roles longer before we can get promotion and progression. And why can't we question it? And why can't we analyze, oh, look at this pattern I'm in emotionally, I'm going to work on that and self-develop. And considering that just as much a priority than just being in this denial, repression loop. And so I think that it's interesting because there's such a disdain always that people have. And what millennials really need is understanding and curiosity instead of this weird disdain, contempt, assumption, and these kind of, like for instance, a millennial, like when they get into an apartment, they'll look at the floor plan and they'll see, oh, they're assuming, of course, that I'll put a screen in the living room, and they'll say, why? Why do I have to do that? They'll do whatever they want. I mean, they have a sense of, I don't have to be in this paradigm. I've seen how this paradigm doesn't serve me and is kind of keeping you kind of stuck. And like a Gen Xers, they just put screens. It seems like they want that keeping up with the Joneses, putting the screen in the room. Of course, why would you even have a living room without a TV screen, you know? And they almost resent that we ask the question. And yeah, there's a lot of things to criticize millennials about, but as with every generation, we react to the things that were dominant in that, and there's often just this kind of constant contrast. So the generation that's coming below Gen Y, Gen Z, is going to react to Gen Y. And all of it brings about change, and some of it is going to be completely toxic and lead to a horrible world, and some of it's going to lead to change. Like there's always going to be some positive changes that come from it and some extreme negative changes. But to have a superiority that your generation is better, that's just not accurate, because your generation's own repressions, denial, and kind of coping mechanisms are what the horrible generation that you hate reacted to, which led to problems. So there's always a cause and effect, and making millennials the scapegoat is just a tired and ignorant way of acting. And it's also just like the millennials, they have, what they need to do is stop being in the sub role, in the slave role, in the subservient role, and thinking that they have to ask those older generations as gatekeepers to getting what they actually want. Because that's what made them feel like, well, what's the use? It's so futile, because these generations don't ever let me go beyond being kind of this serf. And so that's why millennials, like, there's this kind of predominance of them becoming more autonomous and breaking free from the, there's the great resignation with jobs and getting out of that, because it's like, there's this kind of contempt where older generations think, oh yeah, you do that social media stuff because I can't be bothered, it's so annoying, and you guys like your little screens and your narcissism, so just do that. But then also we're going to completely control how you do it, because we don't want to take any risks. We like just get in the conformity. We resent if you do know something about it, because that makes us feel old, and in general we resent feeling old around millennials. So we're going to, instead of maybe looking at ourselves and our own resentment and spite, we're going to project that you have a sense of entitlement, that you are a egocentric little victim, and we're going to act like, oh, look at that selfish person, when there's a lot of selfishness that Gen X and Gen X and baby boomers do not own. They think that they are selfless, and they think they're like, I see this one Gen X woman, she's like a spiritual coach who isn't now, but she's always posting about kind of acting like, oh, the insecurity of millennial women, they're this. And the reason why she's constantly, and the selfishness and insecurity of millennial women. Okay, she's like 10 years older than millennials, right? But then she's always posting about, I am at the age where I may consider plastic surgery, but I don't need it. Well, what she's doing is she's fishing for people to say that she doesn't need it. And she's obsessed with talking about plastic surgery to a degree that clearly shows she's insecure. But then projecting that on younger women, acting like, oh, they are so self-centered, and I didn't grow up with screens, and this is the first year I've ever tweeted, but now I tweet all the time, and it's not my life like it is those young millennials, and oh, they're so insecure about their looks. Like I look at and it's like, and then you watch how much this woman is actually clearly insecure about her looks to talk that much about how she doesn't need plastic surgery, like constantly asserting, protest too much kind of tweets about it. And another thing she'll do is she'll have this kind of know-it-all attitude about how people are kind of, she'll have a know-it-all attitude in a way that's revealing that she doesn't have that humility and curiosity, but man, the younger generation is just so much worse off than her. And again, millennials, when they receive that, do you think that brings out the best in them? That increases their cynicism and what's the point, and their complete desire they want to have that work-life balance even more, because you don't have any respect for them. You just see them as an eternal serf who is an egocentric person, because you can't own, like older generations, are you owning your own selfishness, egocentric side, and narcissism? No, you're always acting as though that's what you see in millennials. This woman even has a thing about how she doesn't follow other people because everyone is just so disingenuous and fake, but she doesn't make a point to follow anybody, but she just follows her own, like she has like 7 different accounts. So she'll just follow herself. And then she has the gall to act as though these like random millennials are just so self-centered. I thought, girl, nobody is going out of their way to talk about how they don't follow other people besides themselves because everybody is just so beneath them. Like, you're revealing yourself, and that's this kind of it's just so, like, millennials, we know we've been called the selfish, the victim. We know all that, and we're like, yeah, we are, and then we think I'm gonna look into ways to get more awareness on it. I'm gonna look into, like, millennials have a way more of a grasp of even just the pop psychology, pop spirituality, in terms of just, they really want to dig in, figure themselves out, figure out their patterns, and try to be better. And we've had that self-development and a willingness to look at our shadow. I think that we have that all because of that what's the point has made us dig into, well, what is the point? What are some deeper meanings we can get into? Because we have, the other overarching thing is, we have Pluto and Scorpio, which means we're going to get, and of course people will mock this, the Gen X and Boomers mock having an interest in, in astrology, psychology, spirituality. And there's plenty to mock about it, but at the end of the day, we are going through to try to be better and to really integrate our shadow and not acknowledge it, rather than just pretend that we're selfless people that really know how to be in the system like good little slaves. Like, no, we are rejecting being in that system because we ask the question, what's the point? And so Pluto and Scorpio is all about that, that confrontation and that willingness to dig deeper and not be just on the surface, it's a placement that shows collectively why we even have that kind of more rebel, contrarian cynicism, asking what's the point, because we're in our evolution, we're aiming at getting beyond these kind of systems instead of just entering them with no question. So anyway, just some thoughts on this millennial disdain that I see from Gen X and baby boomers, that, we should be, if only we were approached with curiosity instead of superiority and certainty.